presentation. So first of all, welcome everybody to our first webinar of 2015. My name is Mark Eberhardt, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Degreed. At Degreed, our mission is to track and measure all learning, including what people learn outside of traditional learning management systems. Today's webinar topic is the learning economy, 5 global trends every Chief Learning Officer, HR executive, and frankly, anyone in the learning and development field should know about. We plan to present for about 35 minutes today and leave 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. Our presenter today is David Blake, CEO of Degreed. Dave has spoken at learning and education conferences all over the world and will be actually speaking at the Training Magazine conference in Atlanta next week. It's rare to meet someone who is as passionate about learning as Dave, so with that, I'll turn it over to Dave to get things started.
Thanks. Pleasure to be with you guys. I always love being on stage and kind of feeling the energy of the crowd, but excited to be doing my first webinar of the year with you guys. So my background is, as Mark mentioned, my life's mission is centered around learning and education. The first company that I was a part of was Zinch, think LinkedIn for college recruiting. After that, I went to help launch a university, New Charter University, whose mission was to be the most affordable accredited degree. So a great mission, great company. It was a competency-based university, which we'll actually be talking a little bit about kind of the competency trend a little bit later. And now Degreed. So as Mark mentioned, we'll be spending just 35 minutes on our 5 global trends, and then I do want to move pretty quickly. I'd love to save time and if possible even get there sooner to hear from you guys. So some question and answer. We'll be doing a poll in the middle of this as well. But the 5 trends that we're going to be covering today, 1 is the explosion of content. 2 is the explosion of funding that is pouring into the space. And certainly those are correlated. But 3 is the trend towards informal and lifelong learning. We're seeing kind of the feast and famine model of higher education kind of blend, and we're seeing the same thing now in the training and development space. That's kind of the formal is blending increasingly with the informal. Then we'll be talking about competencies, skills, and kind of the future of credentials, and then the evolution and the future of tools. So I hope everyone makes it with us to the end, but this really is, if there's a theme for what these trends, how they're shaping the space, it's this. The content in the last 2.5, 3 years has exploded. The amount of options is rising exponentially that individual learners have. This has created complexity both for the learner and you as the administrator, HR, and training professionals. Learners now are more autonomous. We will see the future of kind of BYOL, the bring your own learning to work. And ultimately, it's going to be those who create cultures that empower their learners that ultimately will win in this environment. This is one of my favorite quotes in the entire world. And certainly, we are in a time of great change. But in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And that certainly defines kind of the moment we're in at large, but also as, again, training professionals. So into our first trend. Feel free as I talk. You can start pinging questions into the GoToWebinar frame that we'll field at the end. But feel free to start asking questions or making comments. So I will continue to move quickly through the slides, but this one, starting with just an astounding kind of trend, which is the rate at which knowledge in the world is doubling. And it's gone from 100 years ago, knowledge was doubling essentially every century. To 50 plus years ago, it had come down to a quarter of a century. Then down in kind of our recent history to about a year's time. And at this point, IBM is predicting that it's quickly approaching every 12 hours. Now, that's just astounding. And in a world of big data, there's a lot to perhaps talk about and think about there. But this is also affecting the world of content and learning resources. And we've seen just an explosion of learning resources that have come available to market in the last really kind of 2-3 years. So we just did this with Todd Tauber at Burson was a supporting member of getting this done. We will be doing another one of these in 2015. But essentially, Degreed, we have indexed the entire world of learning resources. And so we, in our database, we're tracking all of it and able to see that growth and the rate at which courses are being developed and new providers are coming to market. I just did a little sample of, to show that explosion. When I say in the last, just couple of years, we've got Coursera, MOOC, edX, Udacity, and Udemy. Just again, quick sample. I cycled through several. It all really looks the same. But this explosion has kind of occurred. It was really mid-2012. The MOOCs really kind of catalyzed it. But then players, 15-year-old players like Pluralsight and Lynda.com and others, if they that moment really defined the change in the trajectory of those companies as well. So while many of these companies are new, many of them have existed for well over a decade, but we see this steep incline in just the last couple of years. We'll continue to talk about kind of what that's done to us. But so as I mentioned, Degreed, we've indexed nearly all of the world's learning, and we continue to roll out across new modalities. And so our database, we have every academic course in America, undergrad, graduate, executive ed. We support kind of 13,000 universities worldwide on all of their courses. But this number, so right now, available online directly to consumers, there is about 250,000 courses available today. And the crazy thing about this is we look at this number compared to the academic courses. This number is quickly catching up to and will, kind of my straight line trending of these numbers. It will catch the amount of courses available from providers, kind of informal learning providers, will catch the amount of education courses available through universities and really probably about the next 5 to 10 years. But there's 250,000 courses available today. That's from over 1,000 providers. And the breakout of that, one of the important things is this commoditization that's happening. As content, more and more content emerges, it's getting higher quality, it's more accessible, and increasingly that competition and the number of options is driving content to be free. And we are seeing that increase in the amount of content that is free. And so the number right now is just shy of about 40%. So taken together, our first trend, with this explosion of content, you have to start thinking about the ecosystem. No longer is any one provider the best option or even a great option. The best content is now spread across the ecosystem. It's coming from not only different providers and different platforms, but different people and professors. And to really get the best experience with such a breadth of options, it really is about looking at the ecosystem at large. So our trend number 2, and this one will be a little bit quicker, but EdTech funding blast past $1 billion. Now, why is this important? It's really because just to show that this isn't going to change. This explosion we've seen is only looking like it will continue. The area is now incredibly well funded, and we will continue to see that proliferation of content and tools and the widening of the ecosystem. Here you see the deal and funding trends since 2009. And here are some of kind of the notable fundings of the last 18 months. But we see just massive fundings going into these companies. Linda actually just did a 168 million in this year as well. No slowing in sight. The learning ecosystem, it's growing. Not only that, that growth is accelerating. So third, now this is a little bit of the so what of it all. It's really looking at the individual's learning. And we are seeing this very strong trend towards the informal and the lifelong. It's really poignant, I believe, and this is part of the genesis that led me to start Degreed. You ask people, tell me about your education, and they inevitably will tell you where they went to college. And that's kind of a legacy of this world in which we, this feast and famine, that we learned early in our careers, and that prepared us for our careers. But again, as we think back to the rate at which information and knowledge is doubling, we are increasingly being forced to learn all the time, just out of necessity to stay abreast. And as we've seen, the content is emerging to do so. And increasingly, we're learning from a diversity of sources over the entirety of our lives. And this is a trend that, again, is only going to continue. Now, this is a survey we did. And the narrative here, I think, is just, really poignant. So nearly 9 out of every 10 people polled said they enjoy learning. Yet, nearly 40% of all working professionals haven't taken a single course of any type since college. And however, over half of everyone surveyed said that they learned something from an article, video, or book every day. Now, in the same survey, we polled people again on if you could spend an hour learning, would you prefer to do it in a course or in more modular chunks? And it was nearly unanimous that people prefer learning in more bite-sized chunks. And if you think, I know in my own personal experience, I've taken now about half a dozen kind of courses since I started Degreed, so in kind of a 3-year period. But that's eclipsed by the learning that I do every day that is solidly focused in articles, videos, books. And then just kind of reinforcing this point, so most working professionals now are spending between 1 to 30 minutes on learning every day. As you look, there is decent percentages that are spending over the 30-minute mark. About half are spending more than 30 minutes every day. And then this one, half of people say they prefer learning to other leisure activities, which this one honestly really astounded me. And I think there's a little bit of, we like to perceive in ourselves, that we are willing to spend our time in very productive ways. But it does go to show that people's, innate desires are to better themselves, are to learn and to be skilling themselves up. I thought this one was really interesting. This is Google Trend data. But the top line is Google searches over a decade. And the bottom is YouTube searches. And essentially this is on the search terms learning, education, and training. And we see the decline in Google searches for all 3 terms. But on YouTube, we see all of them increasing. And if you overlay this or think about the specific providers in that growth curve that we saw in the last 2-3 years, I think together it shows, again, a slant towards the informal, but it also shows that people are shifting how they find things. They are searching for providers for more specific terms. They are looking on YouTube where they know that the content actually exists. And we're seeing this kind of empowerment and shift towards the specific and, learners knowing kind of where they want to go and what they want. Takeaway here, the learners are going direct. And as we think about in the professional environment, this means now often a majority of the learning is happening outside of our systems. This is true in higher education. This is true in the formal training and development space. that people, when a need arises, they are getting the learning they need by searching for it, consuming it directly. So our fourth trend, competency, skills, and credentials. So this just goes, I think, to reflect the fundamental challenge we're facing first in higher ed. We will talk next about working professionals, but this is so astounding that it is something that is just defining a generation and shaping what learning, I think, must come of learning as we look into the future. So right now there's about some odd 23 million, 24 million students at university, undergrad, graduate, advanced degrees. Some of those, it's over 13 million of those won't graduate in time and a half. And so it's different at each of those levels, but taken together, it's roughly half of the college cohort will never graduate. So of that cohort of students who are at university enrolled, that cohort is annually completing 126 million courses, which is just astounding. And that cohort is spending $208 billion annually on tuition. There is just an enormous amount of education that is happening in America that goes entirely unrecognized. It goes uncredentialed, and therefore, in today's environment, nearly unrecognized. The only measurement of learning that has really mattered historically is that degree, and anything outside of that, we don't understand. That which we don't understand, we discount. And in the case of college degrees, almost to zero. Having 90 out of your 120 credit hours of a bachelor's degree does not make you 3/4 of a bachelor degree holder. It's almost entirely binary. You do or don't have your degree. And this is just astounding. And this will shape what this generation demands and it requires from their learning experience into the future. But if we think that this opportunity to better recognize education is only an issue of higher education or of the graduating upcoming workforce, we would be deceived. It is also an incredibly poignant challenge and opportunity for working professionals. So just nearly 60% of working professionals say they would spend more time on informal learning if it was tracked and given professional credit. And think of how much, again, as we saw those numbers of how much informal learning is already happening. That trend is already seeing a huge influx. People are learning informally, and yet nearly 2 out of every 3 people say they would do even more if they were being given credit for this. And we did a survey to poll people on kind of their willingness to pay. And so the question was, would you value a more holistic credential that measures all of your academic, professional, and informal learning experiences? And it was nearly 3/4 of everyone said yes. And this is, again, not those who dropped out of college to think, hey, I'm in the knowledge economy, we hire college graduates, this isn't maybe immediately relevant. This survey filtered first for everyone had to have a bachelor's degree or above, and so this is those who have their bachelor's degree or those who have an advanced degree. Now we do see, willingness to pay from those who have their advanced degree goes down considerably, but it is still incredibly poignant to think of people who have their degrees, who have advanced degrees. Kind of 3/4 of everyone said that they would value having all of their learning credentialed. So what does this mean for the future, and as we look about kind of these trends and what's going to happen? There's this, the term that's kind of been coined is that of micro-credentials. And really that concept largely just means getting people credit for all of their learning. And we are seeing this happen in a number of ways. We've seen the emergence of specific micro-credentials like Udacity's Nano degree. General Assembly has announced they're launching a credential. We've seen the MOOCs get bundled and credentialed. We've seen higher education, so HBS just launched HBX. So we're seeing this emerge in many ways, but the real opportunity here, and I do believe what people will demand of their learning tools, their learning providers, is that they are able to receive recognition for all of their learning. And our last trend is kind of the evolution and the future of tools. And so as we look at all of those trends and think about them together, we really have seen the complexity rise. Learning used to be about single systems, your LMS, silos of learning, often one, maybe a handful of providers. But anymore, learning is an ecosystem. The complexity has increased, and our need to manage that is increasing. We've seen kind of this resurgence in the LMS. But before we go on, this is where we wanted to stop and survey you, the professionals, and just see kind of where you guys are currently at with your LMS. So Mark, I'm going to turn it back over to him, and he's going to quickly launch the survey tool.
So yes, you should see a poll on your screen right now. It's just one question. If you could select the answer and submit it, we will continue with the presentation.
So so on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with your current LMS? And we've got some data at large on this in the next slide, but wanted to see where kind of the audience today is at.
So we'll just give people a few more seconds to vote, and then we'll close the poll. Looks like almost everyone has voted. Okay, I think we'll close it and share the results. So 15%, 17% not satisfied, and somewhat dissatisfied, so we've got kind of a third in the dissatisfied. We've got roughly about another third kind of neutral, and about a third somewhat satisfied. So actually fairly evenly split. We appreciate that, guys. Thank you. Again, this will all be made available, sent out. So this is coming from a research report on enterprise learning and the enterprise learning buyer. But so currently the average net promoter score of people's primary or favorite LMS is about -34. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, to get positive points, it's got to be rated a 9 or a 10. So that's kind of in our 1 to 5 scale. That's the people who voted a 5. And then kind of the middle is neutral, and the dissatisfaction starts creating negative points. So in the industry right now, the top NPS across the LMS industry is about 30. So average, we've got -30, kind of the top is 30. But just about 30% of professionals cite the end user experience as terrible. So there is a spectrum to this, but nearly a third say that the learner's experience on the LMS is terrible. And 15% of professionals believe that a new generation of tools entirely are required to get the job done. So all of this taken together, we've got that complexity that's increasing, we've got the ecosystem that's widening, and as far as the tools, we've seen that's creating challenges. The need to manage this is increasingly poignant. But we're also using tools that weren't built for this explosion, for this kind of changing paradigm in the current ecosystem. And perhaps most importantly, I think, is the current tools in the ecosystem, they were built really to meet the needs of the HR and training professional. It was also in that same survey, it's about nearly a third of people cited that LMSs have the wrong features, too many features, and is nearly 2/3, one of the highest requirements is customization of features in their LMS. And
over the last kind of 10, 15 years, there's just been such an optimization of these tools to meet the needs that we have as training professionals. But what's happened is this shift. Learners now have options. Learners now have a new level of expectation that they have from their tools, and the end user and the experience that they are having is really creating dissatisfaction with them, driving them from our formal tools, and direct. Learners are going direct. And so it really is, to leverage the new ecosystem to make good on this opportunity really is about redefining our tools and our cultures around empowering our individual learners and meeting them on their terms. So that's the end of our trends. Wrapping up with one of my favorite quotes. The one I started with is one of my lifelong favorites. This is just another really solid one. But this is Peter Sang, who came out of MIT. Really, in the long run, the only sustainable competitive advantage is our ability to learn. And, we believe that. For a little bit more, just have one slide on what it is exactly here at Degreed, how we are trying to respond to the changing ecosystem and the trends. And, we focus really, Degreed was built, before it was ever an enterprise tool, it was built to meet the needs of learners. In this world where we're increasingly learning from a diversity of sources over the entirety of our lives, we need a system that can help tie all of our learning together, to help us discover the best resources, to help us leverage other people's expertise, to help us get feedback, not just from unit to unit inside a course, but from course to course, from platform to platform, from work employer to employer, from university to university. And Degreed was built to serve learners in this ever-broadening ecosystem. And so it really was built learner first, but we've ultimately believed that just as higher education has really defined kind of what we mean by education historically, that increasingly our employers is the scaffolding that much of our lifelong learning happens in, and that we knew for Degreed to be ultimately useful to the learner, it had to serve them inside their employment as well. And so last year we launched Degreed for employers, and really it's a tool to help you manage and unlock that entire learning ecosystem. We do that in 3 ways. Degreed is the world's largest database of learning resources. So we've databased all of the resources, tied them to competencies and skills, and we can help you as the professional and the end learner find whatever it is they need to learn. We have curation, custom pathways, custom learning plans, so that in this ever-growing world, it's not an overwhelming process to find what you need to learn next. We can track all of the learning. So this goes back to that question I posed earlier, which is, tell me about your education, and people tell you where they went to college, where the last degree they had was. And the belief that all learning, as we saw in that survey question, that people would learn more if they were given professional credit for it. And on Degreed, we believe that that recognition and that tracking is important. So we are able to track all learning across all providers, across all modalities. We integrate with your LMS. We integrate with any internal learning systems, SharePoint, wikis, portals, as well as the entire external learning ecosystem to be able to track all of the learning. And third, for enterprise, we provide purchasing becomes a hurdle. In a world of expanding options, purchasing often is complex and time-consuming, and Degreed has made a procurement and purchasing solution that makes it so you can just turn on and off content from any provider really in a matter of weeks, so seamlessly. But with that, we will turn the time back over to Mark, who's been for a Q&A.
Thanks, Dave, for a great presentation. Throughout the presentation, we've been getting a lot of questions. So we'll address those now, and if you'd still like to ask a question, you can go to the questions or chat tab in your GoToWebinar panel on the right and ask the question there. You're obviously welcome to ask the question after the webinar, and we'll provide a contact email address for you to do so. So let me pull up the questions that we've had asked so far, and we will go through those. Okay, so first question, we share the PowerPoint slides too? Absolutely. We will be sharing with everyone the recorded version of this, which includes the PowerPoint slides and the voiceover. Second question comes from Marianne. How are you defining knowledge? Not sure what this means.
Yeah, so I assume this is going back, given it's one of our first questions, to the knowledge doubling curve. And really that is knowledge in the sense of known things. So the IBM prediction is actually based on the Internet of Things. So right now, there not a lot is known about your refrigerator, and soon with the Internet of Things, there will actually be knowledge of when the last time you stocked up, the expiration dates of things in your fridge. And so knowledge is defined really generally here, but that trend I just thought is so compelling and poignant that I wanted to open and start with it.
Okay, next question from Douglas. I wonder how easy it will be to calibrate different life experiences to ensure that credits are equitably distributed. This seems challenging. So again, from Douglas, question, I wonder how easy it will be to calibrate different life experiences to ensure that credits are equitably distributed. This seems challenging.
This is incredibly challenging, and so Degreed, in our system, we do quantify inputs. So, everything is given a score and tied back to competencies. It is a challenge. We actually worked with Larry Rosenberger in the creation of this. He's the creator and the man behind the science behind the FICO score. And to give you an example, so right now, as you add your degree or any higher education courses, it's a function of the university, the department, the professor, where known, the grading curve, the course level, the grade that you got. We consider all of those things. In informal learning, we have less inputs. A lot of it is based simply on difficulty and duration, but it is a challenge. And really, kind of the Degreed, and I'm answering this is the context in which I've spent the most time, but Degreed right now is about tracking your learning inputs. And ultimately, the future is about not only learning outcomes, but business outcomes. That is really the gold standard and what I believe the industry will drive towards. And that's really, as you look back to the FICO score, how it worked was, they put their best kind of science against it, but over the decades, they were able to get the feedback mechanisms on the actual credit performance of individuals and to hone the score. And so as the industry, Degreed and others at large, are able to tie learning inputs with skills and outcomes and ultimately business outcomes, we will actually be able to start driving deeper and deeper insight into the value of each type of learning input, but certainly a challenge.
Next question comes from Karen. What does this mean for HR executives and CLOs in terms of practical steps that employers can take to capitalize on these trends and improve L&D?
Yeah, so I think that's certainly a big question. I think really our individuals are learning. They're going to Google, they're going to YouTube, they're reading articles, they're reading books. And anymore the expectation, if I actually need to learn something, I have not been conditioned to go individually or even as a manager of a team or a group to go to HR. Just the cycles are too long. Once we're able to find content, contract and purchase that content, get it into LMS, often that moment is gone. And so when we actually have a poignant need, we just go to Google and we learn it. And so it's really, I think, this command and control, learning and training and development inside organizations has typically been a command and control structure. It's HR down. The tools are purchased at the top. They're managed at the top. The learning is purchased often unilaterally, meaning for the whole organization. So it's not managers buying the content they prefer, the content that they believe is needed. So it's this very command and control top down. And that just isn't agile or efficient enough anymore to actually meet the needs of our employees and our learners in the moment of need. And because of that poignancy in the moment, people just go outside the system and get what they need. For us to ultimately capitalize on this, we've got to actually flip the model. So instead of being HR down, command and control, it really does need to be about empowering the individual. And that's empowering them with the time they need to learn, empowering them with the dollars, empowering them as decision makers. And whether that's actually at the level of individual employee or just one level up with the manager of those employees, but empowering, empower people at the bottom of the organization to get what they need. People do want to learn. We are seeing that repeatedly. You ask the question, slice it different ways. People are learning. They want to learn. We just have to empower them. And ultimately, in an ecosystem as broad, as wide, that's accelerating like it is, it's almost an impossibility to think that we will be able to keep control and to manage this ecosystem effectively. Individuals, you got to empower them. They each have different needs, and I think that's what the future will look like.
Next question comes from Aaron. What trend are you observing in organizations foregoing in-house learning through the use of LMSs or instructor-led training sessions and using online systems / providers to deliver training?
Yeah, so we've actually seen a lot here. So, you know, the biggest takeaway is that anymore, there's just no need to develop any type of generic training. So PowerPoint, Excel, SEO, PR, JavaScript, revenue recognition, anything that is just a competency, there really is almost absolutely no need to go and develop it. And what that's doing is it's freeing organizations up who are able to make that shift, who are used to needing to provide that kind of training and to be spending their dollars to, and really you can refocus around the things that are specific to your company. The ecosystem has answered for all of those needs, and quite honestly, it is highly unlikely that anymore, really any organization could create a best-in-class training against a generic skill. There's just so much competition, there's so much excellence, the quality is improving, and where you are experts is in your organization and the things you need in the proprietary pieces of your business. And so we've seen a lot of companies recalibrating, reshifting, you know, let people, again, purchase the content for those generic skills ad hoc, at will, and you focus your training efforts against things specific to your company.
Next question is from Diane, and I think her question is asked in the context of all the free online learning resources that are currently out there. Her question is, how do you assure the efficacy and integrity of this content?
You know, this is an area where ultimately I think the world will look like other analogs that we have in other areas of content. You know, user reviews aren't great pedagogy, but you know, the way the ecosystem is expanding, I do think that ultimately the future lies in crowdsourced information. That as we are able to get better and better reviews, more and more reviews, you know, and the actual pedagogy and efficacy of the learning, you know, it is a little bit of a jump. Again, I do admit, I do say to, you know, user reviews is not necessarily it's going to be against satisfaction. This is kind of the rate my professor, you know, it could skew in a lot of directions, not necessarily aligned with efficacy. So I think that is going to be a challenge. But I will also say I trust and believe ultimately in learners and in our innate desire to actually learn and to obtain the skills and to overcome the challenges we need. And people will, at large, eventually optimize against high-quality resources, against the resources that do empower them and enable them to get, the job done that they need to. But a poignant question, and I think there's certainly a challenge kind of in the middle of all of that.
So a related question comes from Andreas. He asks, how are learners supported to find the right content and right development path for their self-directed learning?
Yeah, so this, we pulled up some of this Google trend data, but increasingly, Google can't support what is going on. There's such a big difference between the types and quality and difficulty levels of resources out there. There's such a big difference between a JavaScript course that's 2 hours or 2 weeks or 2 months, and I need one that's for experts versus beginners. And Google searching is actually a difficult way to do that. And so, I do think the future lies in curation. And that's a big theme we will see with providers and kind of bundling up their content, creating pathways. I think that's a big trend we will see with the tools. And how we've kind of focused on it at Degreed is we have a couple of models of curation. So one, we have search, but it's a vertical search. So think kayak for learning. 2, there's browse. Sometimes you don't know what you need, so you need that, just to browse through things, see what the best or recommended kind of resources are. Social curation, I believe, is incredibly important. That, in the Degreed system, we know everyone's competencies that they're working towards, and where I have mutual competencies of relevance with a colleague, we are able to see what each other, what we are learning against that competency. And there's always a very high probability that that's relevant. If it was relevant to you, it's relevant to me. We're working on the same challenge, and this is against a competency we are both working towards. We also believe in custom curation, and so custom learning plans and custom pathways that are created by the professionals, by the HR and training professionals.
Okay, so some great questions. We actually have quite a few additional questions, and just out of respect for everybody's time, we've got about 1 minute left for the scheduled webinar. So to respect everyone's time, and again, some of these questions are very thoughtful, and we'd like to respond in a thoughtful way. So what we'll do is we have the names and contact emails of everyone who asked a question. If you didn't get your question answered, we will follow up with you in the next couple hours and answer your question. If anyone has additional questions, here is a slide. If you'd like to learn more, ask additional questions, etc., you can visit us at get.degreed, email us at jeff.degreed.com. You can call us, or you can follow us on Twitter at Degreed. Again, if you asked a question we didn't get to, we'll follow up with an email response promptly today. And if there are additional questions, please feel free to email those to jeff@degreed. Also, if you'd like to watch the presentation again or share it with a colleague, we will be sending out a link to the recorded webinar today, so look for that to come in the next few hours. And then lastly, we're planning to do one webinar per month this year, so we certainly hope you guys enjoyed the presentation today and found it valuable, and we definitely hope you'll join us again. We will be sending out invites for our March webinar in about 3 weeks. So with that, I want to again thank everybody for attending, and hope you all have a great day.
Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it and look forward to getting to know some of you better into the future. Thanks so much.